The crash had come without warning, a blinding flash of headlights, a scream caught in her throat, the screech of metal on asphalt. Elise remembered it all vividly. And then, nothing. When she awoke, the sterile hospital lights she expected were nowhere to be found. Instead, warm golden sunlight filtered through silk curtains, and a faint scent of jasmine lingered in the air. Her body felt different, lighter, softer, more fragile. She sat up and blinked, catching her reflection in a bronze mirror on a nearby table. Her face was unfamiliar. The girl staring back at her was a delicate beauty, with features sculpted like porcelain, though currently pallid and thin from neglect. Long raven hair spilled over her shoulders, and she wore a lavish silk robe embroidered with phoenixes. Panic flooded her chest as memories she didn't own came rushing in: a palace, servants, a cold emperor, and a powerful father, the prime minister of the empire. "No, this isn't real," Elise whispered, gripping the bedding tightly. "This is a set, this has to be a set." But it wasn't. Everything was too vivid, too real. And the servants who rushed in calling her consorting only confirmed what she feared. She was trapped in the body of a concubine, once the beloved daughter of the empire's most powerful minister. A woman who had used her status to marry the crown prince, helping him ascend the throne. A woman who had foolishly abandoned the warmth of her family for the cold favor of a man who used her and discarded her. Elise, now inhabiting that concubine's body, clenched her fists. "You idiot," she spat at the reflection. "You gave up everything for him. And what did he do? He used your family, your name, your body, and then tossed you aside like some worn-out robe." Her fury simmered. No. She wasn't going to suffer like the former Elise did. She had her memories, her wit, her spirit, and her modern knowledge. She was going to survive. No, thrive. But first, she needed to change how she looked. Her current appearance was sickly and weak, nothing like the confident, vibrant Elise she used to be. "I'm getting my beauty back," she vowed, rising to her feet. "Not for him. Not for any man. But for me." As she called for her maidservants, Elise made a silent promise to herself and to the woman whose body she now inhabited. "You gave up everything for love. I won't. I'll take everything back, and this time, I'll decide how the story ends." And so began Elise's second life, not as a helpless concubine, but as a woman reborn in silk and shadows, ready to reclaim her power in the heart of an empire. The courtyards of the imperial harem whispered with gossip the moment Elise took her first walk after weeks of self-imposed seclusion. Servants hid behind willow trees. Concubines peeked through embroidered curtains. No one expected the once pitiful consorting, the emperor's forgotten wife, to return to the sunlight with such vigor. But Elise walked with her chin high, her steps light but purposeful, dressed in a robe of soft lilac silk that complemented the faint color now blooming in her cheeks. Her once haggard face, long dulled by despair, began to reveal sharp elegance, the kind that made people stare and bow. Every morning since her awakening, she had endured bitter herbal tonics, practiced simple stretching routines from her acting days, and even dictated her own skincare oils. Slowly, the sickly pallor faded. Slowly, Elise returned, not just in beauty, but in spirit. But beauty wasn't all she'd come to reclaim. "I heard she sent back the emperor's night summons," one concubine whispered to another. "Does she think she's still important just because her father is the prime minister?" "No. I think she's finally gone mad." Elise smirked as she overheard them during a tea ceremony in the Eastern Garden. The old Elise had begged for affection, throwing away her pride for stolen moments with the emperor. Not her. Not anymore. Later that day, she sat before a bronze mirror again, letting her fingers trace her now fuller cheeks and stronger jawline. Her maid, Xiao, watched her with awe. "Consorting, you look just like a goddess reborn." Elise raised an eyebrow. "No. I look like who I was before this foolish girl ruined everything." She glared at the reflection, not out of vanity but frustration. She had everything: a loving family, freedom, a sharp mind, and she threw it away for a man who only saw her as a chess piece. "All for some fantasy of love," Elise muttered bitterly. Xiao trembled. "Mistress. I don't blame you. I blame her, Elise growled, pointing at the mirror. She could have been so much more. But she chose heartbreak. She deserved better. I deserve better. In the following days, Elise paid visits to her father's estate under the guise of a filial daughter, her first time doing so in years. The moment she stepped through the gates, her father's face lit with both sorrow and hope. Her mother sobbed against her shoulder, calling her by her childhood name. It tore Elise's heart. They had loved her, spoiled her, begged her not to enter the palace. And yet, for the emperor, she'd walked away from them all. I'm back now, she said, softly but firmly. And I won't abandon you again. When she returned to the palace, Elise was no longer the shadow of a broken woman. She was her father's daughter. A modern soul in an ancient world. And this time, the palace would learn, she may have been a concubine, but she would never be anyone's pawn again. By the time the leaves began to turn gold, Elise's transformation was undeniable. Her once silent courtyard brimmed with laughter. Servants rushed to her side with eager eyes, no longer dragging their feet as they had for the abandoned consort. Elise smiled easily, her steps light, her eyes brighter than any jewel. She painted, she danced, she played the zither with a mischief that enchanted everyone around her. And at last, even the emperor noticed. He sat quietly one afternoon in the imperial garden, hidden behind a wall of red maple, watching her perform for the palace children. Dressed in cheerful peach silk, Elise mimicked a flustered scholar being scolded by a fierce village auntie, drawing endless giggles from her young audience. She was brilliant, sharp, fearless, captivating. Nothing like the delicate, silent girl he'd married and forgotten. Who is she? He asked his eunuch. Your Majesty, that is Consort Ing. His breath caught. But where warmth stirred in the emperor's heart, envy kindled in others. The empress, his political bride, watched from the shadows, her eyes cold. She had secured her position with calculation and grace, but Elise's resurgence posed a threat to the balance she so carefully maintained. So, she schemed. And she wasn't alone. One afternoon, during a palace banquet, a favored concubine cried out that her prized jade hairpin had been stolen. Servants searched high and low, and miraculously found it beneath Elise's couch. The air went cold. Whispers erupted. How shameful, why would she steal something so petty? Elise stood, smiling serenely. How strange, she said, lifting the hairpin. This is quite valuable. She held it to the light, then snapped it cleanly in two. Gasps filled the room. If I wanted it, I wouldn't need to steal. I'd simply have one made. The emperor's brows rose. Even he hadn't expected such audacity. Perhaps the real thief was looking to stir trouble? Elise added, turning her eyes toward the accusing concubine. Or perhaps someone envies a little too much joy? The hall fell silent. Elise curtsied gracefully, her head high. If your Majesty wishes to punish me, I'll gladly accept it. But may I remind you, my father funded the very gardens you walk through each morning. A flicker of amusement played across the emperor's face. He waved his hand. Enough. The matter is forgotten. Elise left with a grin tugging at her lips. Later that night, she collapsed into laughter in her chambers. A few more stunts like that and they'll crown me queen of scandal, she told Xiao. You frightened everyone, mistress, Xiao whispered. Even His Majesty. Good, Elise replied with a wink. Let them be frightened. It's the only way to survive in this nest of vipers. But as she sat by her candlelight, sipping tea, she caught herself smiling at the memory of the emperor's stunned expression. She didn't want his attention. She didn't care for his favor. So why did her heart beat just a little faster when she saw it in his eyes? The palace was a golden cage, and Elise had learned to fly within it. But no matter how free she acted, the bars remained. And now, the emperor watched her too closely. He began to appear unexpectedly, at garden strolls, tea ceremonies, even the painting hall where Elise often went to relax. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then she noticed how his visits always coincided with her presence. His gaze lingered longer. His tone softened. He began asking questions about her hobbies, her past, her family. But Elise remained guarded. One evening, he appeared at her courtyard with a box in hand. Inside was a hairpin, beautifully crafted with plum blossoms carved from white jade. "I remembered you once said you liked plum blossoms," he said simply. Elise accepted it with a polite smile. That must have been the old Elise. "I like wildflowers now. They grow freely and aren't bound to seasons or palaces." He blinked at her, caught off guard by the quiet defiance in her voice. "You've changed," he murmured. "I found myself," she replied. And with that, she left him standing in the moonlight. But his visits didn't stop. They only became more frequent. He came with gifts, invitations, gentle smiles. He laughed at her jokes and listened to her stories with interest. His eyes were no longer cold. At times, Elise caught herself relaxing in his presence, even laughing genuinely. But as quickly as the warmth came, she would push it away. "No," she whispered one night as she paced her chamber. "I'm not here to fall in love. I came to survive. To leave." The Emperor's attention was dangerous. It brought jealous eyes. The Empress began to send silent threats, poisoned teas Elise never drank, missing items, servant bribes. It was clear the palace wasn't safe. Not even with his favor. And worst of all, she was beginning to feel the weight of the golden cage again. "I don't want to fight for a man's affection," she confessed to Shio one night. "Not him. Not anyone." "Then why do you smile when he comes?" Shio asked gently. "Because it's easy to forget how cold it gets in here, when someone brings a little warmth." She didn't hate him. Not anymore. But she didn't trust him either. He had used the former Elise, married another woman while Elise wasted away, and now, when she shined again, he came back, acting as if he'd only just noticed her. It was too little, too late. One morning, as she gazed at the palace walls through the window, she whispered, "I don't belong here." "I never did." That day, she began sending inquiries to her family, requesting permission to visit more often, asking about outside lands, trade routes, even the border towns. She wasn't just dreaming of freedom anymore. She was planning it. And this time, not even the Emperor's newfound affection could keep her in chains. The Emperor grew restless. He had given her attention, warmth, gifts, things most concubines would sacrifice anything for. But Elise, she only smiled politely, offered witty remarks, and then drifted away like a breeze he couldn't hold. She didn't ask to see him. She didn't plead for favor. She didn't seem to want him at all. And it drove him mad. When he learned she had been asking about border towns and trade routes through her family, a sharp fear twisted in his gut. Was she planning to leave? To vanish from the palace and his reach? He couldn't let her go. So, he made a choice. The moon was high the night he came to her chambers unannounced. The air was cool and still. Elise was dressed simply, seated by the window with a book in hand. Her peaceful expression changed the moment she saw him. "Your Majesty," she said cautiously, rising. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, this woman who had once meant nothing to him, but now somehow occupied every corner of his thoughts. "I heard you've been thinking of leaving," he finally said. Elise's expression didn't change. "Yes. You are my consort. You belong here." Her smile was sad. Belonging and imprisonment are different things. Something in his face darkened. "Stay," he said. "I'll give you anything. Power, favor, protection." "I don't want any of that," she interrupted gently. The word stung. He had never begged for anyone. Never had to. And now, the one woman he wanted was slipping away. So he did the unthinkable. The next morning, Elise awoke with a pounding headache and the lingering scent of incense in the air. Her body felt heavy. Her thoughts hazy. It didn't take her long to realize what had happened. He had drugged her. She sat in silence for hours, her tea untouched. Her joy, the brightness that once danced in her eyes, dimmed. Her laughter stopped. Even her loyal maid, Xiao, noticed the shift. "You're quiet, mistress," she said softly. "I'm tired." The next few days passed in a blur. Elise said little. She still smiled, still played the zither when summoned, still walked in the garden. But it was different. Muted. The emperor watched her closely. He tried to rekindle her light, bringing music, poets, exotic gifts, but she only responded with politeness. And then, one day, she knelt before him in the Hall of Fragrance. "Your Majesty," she said, voice steady. "I wish to return to my family estate for a time." His jaw tightened. "You want to leave me?" "No," she replied. "I want to find myself again. If I stay, I'll lose who I am." The emperor said nothing. But when she rose and walked away, her back straight and her steps quiet, he saw what he had done. He had broken the very spirit he once admired. He had won her body, but lost her heart. And for the first time as emperor, he felt powerless. The Elise who returned to her family estate was no longer the glittering, spirited woman who once lit up the palace halls. She was quiet now, contemplative. She sat in gardens and watched butterflies flutter over plum blossoms. She smiled at her mother's warm meals, her father's clumsy attempts to pretend he wasn't worried. And for the first time since waking in this world, Elise felt safe. But she was also unsure. One morning, as she helped her mother arrange medicinal herbs, Elise suddenly paused. The smell of a particular root struck her. She leaned over the bowl and gagged. "Are you ill, my daughter?" her mother asked, alarmed. "I'm fine," Elise replied, though she wasn't. Her appetite had waned, her body felt bloated, her emotions volatile. Something was changing. It wasn't long before a midwife confirmed it. "You are with child, consort Ing," the woman said with a soft smile. Elise sat in stunned silence. Her hand went to her belly, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. The emperor's child. Her child. Tears burned her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the rush of everything she had been holding in. She was carrying the child of a man she had once loathed, later admired, and now couldn't forgive. But the moment she touched her stomach again, her heart whispered something she hadn't allowed herself to say out loud. "I loved him." She said it aloud that evening, during dinner with her parents. Her father froze. Her mother's spoon dropped into the bowl. "I loved the emperor," Elise admitted quietly. "Even when I told myself I didn't. Even when I swore I only wanted to escape." Her mother covered her hand. "We feared as much." "I didn't want to," Elise whispered. "But he saw me. Not in the beginning, but later, when I became myself again. Still, he tried to trap me. He tried to own me. And I couldn't stay." "Love isn't always enough to survive a palace like that," her father said solemnly. "You were right to come home." She nodded, and tears finally fell. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving him," she said. "I left because I started loving myself more." In the weeks that followed, Elise found a new rhythm to her life. She wrote poetry, embroidered tiny baby robes, and even sent letters to the palace, short, polite ones with updates about her health and requests for medicinal herbs. The emperor never replied. But he sent every herb she asked for. Double the amount. He didn't come. But his silence said more than words could. And in that silence, Elise found peace. She would raise her child surrounded by love, not schemes. In sunlight, not shadows. For once, she had chosen her own path. And she had no regrets. The day Elise gave birth, the skies wept with gentle rain, as if the heavens themselves were washing away the sorrows of her past. She delivered a son, a healthy boy with wispy black hair and deep gray eyes that shimmered with hints of brown, just like hers. The moment she held him, a powerful love bloomed in her chest. Fierce, protective, unconditional. "My little Rui," she whispered. "You're the start of something new." Her family rejoiced. The estate was filled with joy, warmth, and laughter. Elise, once a lonely concubine abandoned behind palace walls, was now a mother, loved, free, and strong. But even freedom could not erase the lingering shadow of the emperor. She hadn't seen him in months. Not since she left. Not even after the midwife's message was quietly sent to the palace, "A son is born." And then, one crisp autumn morning, he arrived. Elise was sitting beneath a persimmon tree, cradling Rui, when she heard the rustle of robes and the unmistakable sound of heavy boots on gravel. She looked up, and there he was. No fanfare. No gold-plated carriage. Just a man in a simple dark cloak, his imperial seal worn like a pendant around his neck. Elise's breath caught. The emperor, or rather, the man she once loved. "You came," she said softly. "I had to." He stepped closer, eyes never leaving the child in her arms. "Is he?" "He's yours," Elise said. "But he's mine first." He nodded. Slowly, reverently, he knelt beside her and looked at Rui. The child yawned and curled closer to Elise's chest, unaware of the world that had once fought over his very existence. "He looks like you," the emperor murmured. "No. He looks like both of us. The parts that were real." A silence passed between them. Heavy, but not bitter. "I don't regret leaving," Elise said. "Even though it hurt. I couldn't live fighting for your favor, or raising a child in that poisoned palace." "I know," he whispered. "And I don't blame you." She looked at him then, not as her emperor, but as a man who had tried too late to be the right one. "I came to say," he hesitated, voice rough, "I've named Crown Princely as regent. I will remain emperor in title, but I've stepped away from court duties." Elise stared, stunned. "Why?" "Because I'm tired," he said. "Tired of being surrounded by snakes. Tired of playing God. I just want to be a husband. A father. If you'll let me." Her heart beat loudly in her chest. Could she really allow him back into her life? Into their son's life? She looked at Rui, then back at him. "Only if you promise to come as a man, not an emperor." He bowed his head. "I promise." And for the first time, Elise reached for his hand, not out of duty, or fear, or longing, but out of choice. In the end, the emperor remained ruler in name. But in the countryside estate where persimmons grew and laughter filled the air, he was simply a man. A husband. A father. And Elise? She was no longer a concubine, no longer a pawn. She was a woman who had rewritten her fate, on her own terms.